المدرسة صوت على قلبي عسل يلا يا باص المدرسة خدنا على درب الأمل زمر باص المدرسة صوت على قلبي عسل يلا يا باص المدرسة خدنا على درب الأمل.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Shakira Akabo and you are watching Schools Out. In this all-new series made for ITV, we are going to look at schools practice and highlighting what schools do to empower and uplift our children, our learners, our teachers, and schools themselves. Our first episode on the series is going to be on bullying at schools. And our first guest is Dr. Munira Musa from the Wits School of Education. Dr. Musa, welcome to the show today.
Thank you so much, Shakira. I'm so glad to be here.
Okay, can you tell us, Dr. Musa, a little bit about yourself?
Okay, I started off as a teacher. I was trained as a teacher. I've been in school space, in a primary school setup for about 15 years. For 3 of those 15 years, I was a school principal. I then moved on to an academic space, and I've been at the School of Education at the University of Wits for the last 7 years. This is my 7th year at Wits.
Okay, so lots of experience in the educational space across all platforms.
Yes.
Okay, so for today's topic on bullying, can you tell us what exactly constitutes bullying?
Okay. So I think we need to actually start off by understanding that there are many definitions about bullying. But the most accepted and commonly used definition about bullying is that bullying has got to do with power. And when you bring people into the same space, like a school space, for example, you are definitely going to have power relationships, right? So there's issues about power. There are issues around threatening, okay? And once you start threatening people, what you then start doing is that you bring about fear in somebody. And once fear has been established, the next level will be achieved in terms of terror being induced into somebody. So that's the important thing about bullying, is that it's fear, it's harm, it's terror, but more importantly, it is an intentional act that takes place. So teachers would often say, how do I know it's bullying? Right. So every behavior is not necessarily a bullying behavior. Okay. Bullying has got to do with something that is intentional, it is pre-thought out, it is focused on an individual, and it is carrying out a certain act. So that's the important thing that we need to decipher about. Was this an intentional act, or was it just an accident, something that just happened, or something that was said in jest, or is it ongoing? Is it an ongoing behavior that takes place? Okay. We also need to know that, and I don't like the word bullies, but I would use the word bullies here, is that bullies are very, very smart individuals, right? Okay. So they would test their target or their victim, and to see how far they can push the boundaries with somebody. So if they find that they can push the boundary with you, it is when they will start inducing fear. And once they see that the person is susceptible to issues about fear, that is when terror continues. So bullying is also an ongoing act, an ongoing event that takes place. It is not necessarily something that takes place once off. Okay. Yes, it can happen once off, but it is more inclined to be something that consistently or continuously happens.
So we're looking at like a chain of events, things that happen in succession.
Exactly.
And continuously.
Continuously happened. So I'm not saying that we need to just avoid things that happened once off, because we also know that if you put a stop to an incident once off, it won't perpetuate to becoming more and more. But I think teachers often find it very difficult to make the distinguish between, is this bullying or is this just an accident? Yes. And there's no clear-cut way to dealing with it. I think the safest way is that any incidents need to be addressed and taken note of. Okay. Because it can quickly go from being an incident to becoming a full-blown episode that continues and continues.
What do you think, Dr. Musa, in your opinion, is the way that we can protect our learners at school from bullying?
I think it's a very difficult one to say what can we do. I think what we first need to understand is that what happens in the broader society, in our communities, in our environments, what happens in our homes, all those things come to play at a school context. Right. So there's a lot of pressure on schools to say, what can schools do?
Yes.
But schools are sometimes at the end of that process, of the social process, and that social hub of what's happening. So that's the first thing we need to note, is that we are not getting children in our schools that come from pure, perfect backgrounds, that they haven't engaged or seen different things. But nonetheless, in our school spaces, that's where we are expected to deal with bullying and what we need to do about bullying. So what we also need to know is that in any cycle, when we call it a cycle in academic terms of bullying, there are three key role players. It is what we call the bully, the bullied, and the bystander, right? And so it's obvious the bully is the person who's carrying out the behavior, the bullied is the recipient or the victim, as we would call it, and the bystanders are onlookers, right? But for me personally, I think that the teacher is actually the fourth role player in this whole event. Because teachers, to me, should be present. Teachers should do something about it. So what research tells us is that bullying normally takes place in corridors, in toilets, on sports fields, even in classrooms. And this is South African research, that in classroom context, bullying takes place. Bullying takes place after school. And so the question that we need to ask ourselves is, where are teachers during all these times? Because these should be spaces that are monitored by teachers and that teachers should have an oversight over. So those are some of the key components, I would say, is that we first understand the role players, we understand the role of the teacher. Then I want to move on to something that I'm very passionate about, and that is the role of the bystander. So if you looked at any bullying incident, you would find that there is one bully, two or three bullies, one victim or two, but sometimes hundreds of bystanders standing by and observing and watching what is happening. And so we call that bystander behavior. And often bystander behavior happens because people don't know what to do. Children don't know what to do. So schools should start by firstly opening up a conversation about bullying, engaging learners at all levels, but most importantly, children should know what to do if they are being bullied. And so should teachers. Teachers need to know what to do if bullying is reported to them as well.
Okay. So if, with this whole, as you mentioned, with the bystanders, with the teachers, is it possible that we can train our learners? Can we train our teachers via workshops, via, getting, expertise in and telling them this is what you do in a case where you are being bullied?
Most definitely that is what's needed. So I find it incredibly interesting when I go into schools and I see anti-bullying zone or no bullying taking place. So I think we need to first start off by saying that as teachers, our behavior plays an important role. We set the tone for our space, and our school is our space, right? So schools are social spaces that is dictated by the behavior of the adults in those spaces. So it's interesting when you see a teacher saying this is a no bully zone, but when you watch that teacher's behavior, all that teacher emanates is someone who's a bully. So how we treat children is important. How we treat our colleagues is also important, because children watch our behaviors. Like they watch what parents do, they watch what you do as a teacher. And so we are modeling behaviors to them that sometimes is not acceptable. So we might say one thing, but we do something else that contradicts what we are saying. So if we are not respecting those children in our class, but we're saying it's an anti-bully zone, it's the same problem to me. We're actually just showing them that this is how we act and behave. So you asked me about training. Training is important. But I think before training even takes place, schools need to get the buy-in of all stakeholders. And when I say all stakeholders, it's the school, it's the teacher, it's the management, it's parents, it's learners, and it's the Department of Education, because it has a ripple effect. Schools can have wonderful protocols in place and procedures in place, but if everyone doesn't buy in or adhere to it, it's problematic. So yes, training is important for teachers. Teachers need to know what is it that I'm going to do if bullying is reported to me. There is also research done on teacher behavior and teachers just developing different attitudes. Some teachers regard it as a rite of passage to be bullied because they've been bullied, right? And that's not correct. Some teachers regard it as this child is just complaining, is just nagging, this is not important. But it's those little behaviors of teachers that are going to be important when dealing with bullying. So yes, teachers need training. We need to have clear procedures and I would say consequences. And I don't think we should call them punishments or penalties because that perpetuates the issue of fear and anger. So it should be consequence. Children should know that there are consequences. But what we find difficult to do in a school space with everything is maintaining what we're doing and being consistent. So there needs to be consistency. Teachers need to know that there's a designated person to go to. If I don't know how to handle the situation, I need to go to a designated teacher to assist me. So not all teachers can be trained necessarily, but if a few are trained and well trained, and all of this is controlled in a central place, I think it can make a big effect in managing bullying.
All right. You mentioned just now about reporting incidents of bullying. And most often learners are not the ones reporting the incidents of bullying, especially if it's taking place with themselves or to themselves. How can we ensure that other learners, the bystanders, or other learners maybe in other classes who notice something's not right here or that child's always being targeted, how can we ensure that those learners are safe in reporting their incidents of bullying?
So I think to ensure that children must feel or learners must feel that if I report it to a teacher, that teacher will handle it in a professional and a humane manner. So what teachers do is you'll report bullying, they'll call the bully with the victim and then address it together. Sometimes there's so much fear and terror, as I've said, inculcated in that child, you're just making it worse. Sometimes teachers just brush it off and do nothing about it. So children need to know the teacher will take action. They need to know that there are clear steps, that the teacher will be professional in how he or she handles it and protect the victim at all cost. That's the important bit in all of this.
All right. Thank you so much for that important information. Dr. Munira Musa, who's talking to us about bullying at schools, a perpetual problem affecting all schools, regardless of whether it's wealthy schools, inner city schools, township schools. Bullying takes place everywhere. Thank you very much, Dr. Musa. We really appreciate your expertise and your advice.
Thank you, Shakira.
And we'll go for an ad break now. Welcome back to Schools Out. Now I have with me Mr. Douglas Andrews from Radley Private School in Randburg, Johannesburg. Welcome to the show, Mr. Andrews.
Good day, Shakira. Thank you very much for having me on your show.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, Mr. Andrews.
Okay, well, I'm the principal of Radley Private School. I've been here for 2 years now. And before that, I was the deputy principal of Crawford in Lone Hill. And I've got 20 odd years experience in education. I've taught in the UK for 5 or 6 years. And as a teacher, I'm a science and biology teacher. But one of my passions in education is research in education. I'm currently in the final swings of my PhD in inclusive education at Wits University and hoping to finish that up quite soon.
Thank you. So our topic for today's episode is on bullying, and in particular, cyberbullying. Can you tell us if there's a difference or what you perceive is the difference between bullying and cyberbullying?
Okay, well for me, if you think about bullying as a whole, I don't really believe you can separate them. They are one and the same. I was recently watching a show about Elon Musk. He was giving a talk and he spoke about how our cell phones and cyber, the whole cyber world is such a connected part of our reality. We live vicariously through our phones. So, he almost spoke about humans as being cyborgs, that us and our machines are so connected for our functionality. So to separate cyberbullying from other bullying, to me, doesn't really make sense. It's one and the same. And often by the time something gets onto social media or onto a WhatsApp platform and it gets recognized there, it's actually emanated somewhere else. It came from home, it came from something that might have happened in the classroom or at recess, and it played out on social media. So you actually need to look at it in one holistic,
As a complete
picture, yes.
Okay. Earlier on when we were chatting, you mentioned that you and your staff have been trained in cyberbullying. Would you like to tell us a little bit about that?
Okay, I'm going to start from the top there. And, you know, people often speak about training, and you often hear that thrown around in schools. Did you do training? The research shows that once-off workshops, or you get in an expert to come and talk to your staff or talk to your kids about something, the research shows that they're actually very ineffective. And if it's not something that's part of, say, the marinade of your school or the culture of your school, it dies very quickly. You know, I've had that experience myself. You go to a workshop, you watch it, it's great in the moment, but the minute you're in your car and you're stuck in traffic, you start to forget what you learned. So there needs to be some sort of traction between what you would get from a program or an expert speaker that links in with the outcomes of your school.
Right. So it has to be part and parcel of the whole ethos of the school.
Yes, for sure. And you know, for me, when you think about teaching in today's world, teaching is more than just delivering an academic program. It's about that pastoral care and about looking at the child holistically in your school environment. Every single aspect of a school needs to be rooted and embedded in a system of care. And if you think about that age-old phrase of loca parentis, when children are dropped off at your school, just like they would be in a home, those teachers become those pseudo-parents for the children for the day.
Absolutely.
And they need to not only worry about the academics, they need to worry about the whole development of every child. So I see things like an anti-bullying program or caring about the well-being of children as something that has to be fundamental to everything that is done within the school. It needs to start in policy. There needs to be an absolute it needs to be a non-negotiable that bullying is not accepted in your school, and that there is a way of interacting with people, an acceptance of diversity, and acceptance of people's individual characteristics, and that everybody in their day promotes the care of other people. That's got to be fundamental. And if you've got that kind of program existing in your school, you can then start to develop that further.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about what cyberbullying actually is.
Okay, well, the nuts and bolts of cyberbullying is basically when somebody puts out something onto a social media platform or WhatsApp platform. It could be even through emails, and it is a systematic attempt to basically break down another person. It can be to humiliate them, it can be to harm them, it can be to defame their character. It's often done in an insidious way, and it's to expose something about a person into a greater community, and it's done through a cyber channel.
And how does this result in, we often see excluding or exclusion of children. How does cyberbullying contribute to this type of exclusion?
Well, what happens is if a child comes to school or they're in a school environment and they are a victim of cyberbullying, they are then aware that everybody in the community who's connected to those social media links is aware of their humiliation. And what happens then is the child will withdraw. Their behavior will change. They will start to feel very negative about being in that school environment. And that social withdrawal is then a type of symptom of an exclusion. They won't want to participate in the environment, and they'll feel very, very vulnerable and humiliated in that environment.
Right. And tell us a little bit about the legal implications of cyberbullying. When learners experience cyberbullying and it eventually comes out somehow or the other, what are the legal implications for A, the person who did the bullying, and B, the person who is being bullied?
Okay. I want to answer your question a little bit differently if I can. And there's something that was always concerned me about many schools, is that something will happen in the school and they believe, like cyberbullying or call it normal bullying, and they try to handle it in-house, and they don't realize that actually a crime has been committed. If you bully somebody or you attack their character on a cyber platform, what you've essentially done is it's abuse. It's an emotional abuse, it can be a defamation of character, and I would take it as far as to say that it can also be construed as almost a grievous abuse. And the court of law states quite seriously that if you bully somebody on those type of platforms, you can go to court. It is a criminal offence, and that is what often doesn't happen. So what happens is there's a cyberbullying offence that takes place. The schools decide to handle it in-house. It never reaches a legal platform, and ultimately then people feel that there's no consequences or accountability for cyberbullying. And all that does is it allows it to continue to mushroom in a school environment. On a personal level in my school, I have a very close relationship with our local police station, and they've got police counsellors. And if I encounter any form of bullying, cyberbullying included, I involve those people from word go. Because then they can come to the school. Not only do they offer a level of counselling, but they also bring with them the legal side. And they see, has this cyberbullying instance reached the threshold of a criminal offence? And I have no hesitation in taking it into that criminal domain, because somebody can be seriously damaged through cyberbullying, and people need to be held accountable. Yes. You know, and I'll take it to another example. You know, if somebody bullied somebody, or there was a cyberbullying incident in the workplace, you know, outside of a school, nobody there would hesitate for there to get the law involved.
Absolutely.
However, often in schools we don't go that route, or we try and squash the issue or push it under the carpet.
Yes.
That is the biggest mistake that a school can make. Schools need to be transparent. They need to say openly that bullying, cyberbullying included, is a symptom of emotion, and it's a symptom of society. All school environments are basically a slice of society. It's a microcosm of what's out in our broader society. So for somebody to decide that in our school environment bullying is not a problem, my first question would be to them, well, so that means that what is acceptable? So if you're telling me that there have been 5 bullying incidents this year, that's acceptable because it's not 10. What about that one incident where somebody felt that they had been bullied?
Yes.
They don't care whether there were 5 other bullying incidents that year or they're the only one. You need to have a process and a program in your school that targets and is very vigilant around any type of bullying that might take place.
And that we can use to eradicate bullying as a problem, where learners are aware of it, teachers are aware of it, parents are aware of it. And I think that's the important part. We need everybody to be on the same page when it comes to how we address bullying in schools.
And I'd go as far as to say that you never eradicate it. The minute your thought process is, I need to eradicate it, there's a feeling that one day it will be gone. There needs to be, and then what happens is when you have that feeling, you don't set in place enough structures within the school environment so that there's a continuity that you constantly are addressing it. You know, just something that I do in my school that you know might be a little bit unique is at any meeting, any type of, be it staff meeting, stakeholder engagement, early morning meeting, the topic of bullying or the wellness of the children and care is the first item on the agenda, even if it doesn't have too much to do with the rest of the meeting. And that is addressed and attacked first before you carry on with it. So the idea of being vigilant is foremost in people's minds.
So a good reminder, that's actually a very good way of reminding the staff and yourselves as well that bullying is at the top of your agenda.
Absolutely, and the learners as well.
Okay, so we're going to take a short break now, and we'll be back after this. Don't go away. Welcome back to Schools Out. If you've just joined us, we're talking about cyberbullying with Mr. Douglas Andrews from Radley Private School in Randburg, Johannesburg. As we were just mentioning now, Mr. Andrews, you were talking about how cyberbullying and parents and all the issues around legal implications of cyberbullying. often when parents find out that their children have been involved in cyberbullying, either as victims or as perpetrators, they tend to take the drastic move and remove all devices and take away the phones and so on, or block internet usage. This is quite a drastic move. Do you think it solves any problems, or what do you think about this?
Okay, I don't think it solves a problem at all. I just think that there needs to be a measured response to everything. And our children today, they are connected. You know, especially as they get a little bit older, the use of technology is very much a part of their lives. And something I always say to parents when I have staff meetings is I try to teach them the difference between delegation and abdication. Abdication of something is just to say, well, there's your phone, you can use it, and go for it in a sense. Right. Delegation is you almost contract with a child. You say, you're living under my roof, you're under my care, and you're a minor. So I'm prepared to let you have a cell phone, but we're going to decide on what the working parameters of that cell phone is, what kind of access you will get to what your child is looking at. And I believe 100% that parents should have access to what their children are looking at and to be able to go through it. Even if it's not necessarily something to do with bullying, they can educate their children on how to respond to things, how to interpret things, and also protect them from the wider dangers that we're aware of that live out in cyberspace and on the net. But when it comes to answering your question, I fundamentally believe that the drastic steps can actually create more anxiety within children. So what you need to do is, if you've got your contract in place, you sit down with the child and you say, let's have a cooling off period from that particular app where the abuse might have taken place. So it could be Instagram, or it could even be WhatsApp, and you'd say, okay, we're going to take you off that for a while, we're going to allow a cooling off program, and then maybe a gradual integration back onto that particular app. Reason for that is, even if the school had taken drastic measures to sort it out, it could even have gone to a legal level, you don't really have control over other people's actions. People act out, and they then might decide to continue to bully on that platform. Or the other people on the platform might now be giving their commentary on what's been going on. And often the history still exists in the chain of communications. So that is a very sensitive touch point for that child. So to now go on all the time and have this constant reminder of what was hurting them can be very detrimental. So to maybe say to the child, well, I'm not going to take you've still got access to your Google, you might still have access to Facebook. I know it's more what us old fuddy-duddies use, but you're still allowing the child to feel that they're connected. But you're basically putting forward the healthy relationships on those platforms. And then slowly you can start integrating them back into the apps that they were using. Once you have made sure that, or you feel safer, and you make sure that any evidence of that bullying has now long gone off that platform.
Thank you for that. And what would you say? You'd mentioned earlier about school counselling and police counselling. At your school, do you have trained psychologists as counsellors, or how does counselling work at your school?
Okay, I actually take this part very seriously. I think that if it comes down to the whole idea of inclusive education, if you just have one lone psychologist who people hardly know wandering the property or in a little room, that doesn't solve any problems. Every teacher is a counsellor in my school. I believe they need to be trained and they need to be accountable for how they do it. You think about something like first aid. People are very big on first aid training in a school, which you should be. But a company come in, they train your teachers, they learn the A, B's and C's of first aid, then they get assessed and they do an assessment on how do you do this. And that is fundamental. So for me, every teacher gets trained, maybe by psychologists, maybe by police counselors, on how to actually handle it if a child approaches them and says, I'm being cyberbullied or I'm being bullied. And often teachers don't do it because they don't have the necessary A, B's and C's. What are the steps to follow in order to solve that, in order to get a resolution for the problem, no matter what that resolution is. So for me, staff are trained, staff are assessed, and every staff member has it into their own KPIs for their appraisal on how effective are you at handling those type of pastoral or care elements within a school. Obviously then once it's identified, you have a look at what threshold does it need to be handled. Can it be handled by that teacher, maybe by that teacher and an HOD and the life orientation teacher, but in some cases not. It needs to go to what I call the police counsellor level, or get a psychologist or a counsellor involved from outside of the school community to deal with it. But once again, you can't abdicate, because just by saying the child must go to a psychologist, what link do you have that therapy has had any good? So it's better you need feedback, and you need to be able to, you need closure on the bullying event.
On the bullying. Thank you very much, Mr. Andrews, for that. And
It's a
lastly, do you have any golden words for parents out there?
Okay, well, hi parents. I think that it's absolutely fundamental that as parents you interrogate the policies and the approach that your school, your child's school, has to bullying. Speak to the teachers, speak to the principal, find out what they do on a daily basis to address bullying, how seriously they take it, and find out some evidence. Because for me, it is absolutely fundamental to education that we're on top of it all the time, and we're protecting these young children that are in our care.
Thank you very much, Mr. Andrews, for the lovely, informative interview on cyberbullying.
Shakira, it's an absolute pleasure, and it was great being here. Thank you. Thank you.
And that was Mr. Douglas Andrews from Radley Private School in Randburg, Johannesburg.
زمر باص المدرسة صوت عالي زمر باص المدرسة صوت عالي.
Welcome back to Schools Out. Now we were talking to Tanya Kutsa from Village Montessori School in Pretoria. Tanya, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Shakira.
Would you like to maybe tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, I'm a mother of 3 girls and I have been a Montessori teacher for 18 years now.
Okay, all right, that's great. And Tanya, at your school, you have kids starting from toddler or preschool going all the way to matric. At what age do you feel it is necessary to bring up the topic or address the issue of bullying?
We address it in a little bit of a different way. We try to be positive about behavior. So the golden thread in Montessori education is respect. Respect for oneself, respect for others, and respect for the environment. So from 18 years old or 18 months old already, we give them the chance to practice correct behavior by role models of the teacher, the other children who are in the environment who have been there for a while. So, and Montessori explained this as grace and courtesy, where children practice in real life how to interact with others, how to give each other turns. So if we come from that premise, it is easy when a child is not being respectful to another, so in any case when it starts to become bullying, to help that child to go back to the basic premise of respect and analyze their behavior, and then discuss on how we can do better the next time.
Okay, so you mentioned analyzing the child, asking the child to analyze their own behavior.
Yes.
In terms of that, how do we look at the reasons when we're doing this when the kids are doing this analysis? What are some of the reasons that children bully?
That is a very, very important question, because most people think that children who bully are just naughty. That's very, very seldom the case. A child who bullies very frequently come from a point where they are insecure, they are afraid, they try to show more power than that they actually have. We always try to get to the root of the problem. What is the home area like? Are they feeling empowered at home? Because that powerlessness that they might feel in another situation, it might not be home, but in another situation might manifest in trying to control others. So it's very important to understand that there's definitely underlying reasons for bullying, and to know your children and to observe why this is happening. And the only way to do that is with a dialogue, to listen to how the children explain their behavior. When we have had an incident, the teacher would call in the 2 children, the victim as well as the bully, and we will discuss how this happened, what exactly happened, why do you think this happened, but then specifically, how did you then show respect to the other person?
Okay. What kind of advice could you give to teachers who obviously deal with bullying on a daily basis?
I believe it's really important to listen to the children. They are saying things not with their words but with their actions. The victim, first of all, must be listened to and understand why they are not able to stand up for themselves, and then to give them that skill by standing with them, first of all, against the person that is bullying them, but also by giving them a chance to practice that on their own and independently, because eventually you want them to be able to do that when they're alone and they can stand up for themselves. But just as important, the listening to the bully, the listening to the child who is crying out, maybe saying, I feel unloved, I feel powerless, to help them to get the skills to be able to interact with other people in a more positive way is just as important.
Absolutely. And there we have it. Tanya Kutsa telling us about teachers and how they deal with bullying on a daily basis at schools. Stay with us. We'll be back. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back. We are continuing our conversation on bullying. With us right now we have a counselor that works with children, Nadia Souza Loreto. Welcome to the show, Nadia.
Thank you for having me.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
So I'm doing the B-Psych degree. I'm in my practical year and I'm enjoying it. I really love this field of work. It's very rewarding to know that we are able to make a difference in this world.
Okay. All right. So our first question, Nadia, from your counseling perspective, tell us what exactly is bullying?
So bullying is basically a multifaceted type of behavior that includes factors that involve harm, harassment, humiliation, exposure, and these basically are, bullying is classified between school-age children, and also it's a behavior that is not accepted or wanted by victims. So it's basically where fear is instilled through manipulation, aggression, so that one can get one's way. And this occurs when when there's very limited or non-existent adult supervision, usually in isolated environments. That's when bullying takes place.
And who exactly, is there a specific type of learner or type of child that gets bullied, or does it happen everywhere?
It's difficult to say that there's one range of factors that contribute to bullying. For example, you can't say that because this child is this race or this gender that they will be bullied. It's rather victims tend to have shared personal characteristics that include low self-esteem, low confidence, they're usually introverted, shy, and they tend to be powered by other people. And just like victims have personal characteristics that are shared among them, so do bullies. They're very mean-spirited, they're hostile, they're impulsive, and this is why it's important that teachers recognize what type of learners they have in their class to kind of say, this may be a potential bully, and they can kind of deter the behavior so it makes it more difficult for bullying to take place.
So they just need to step in at that right time.
Yes, if you know what characteristics characterize a bully, you can kind of see in class, you can pick out which children are more irritable or more impulsive or more mean-spirited. And you can kind of say, okay, these children I need to keep a closer eye on because they are potential bullies. Yeah.
And can you tell us who exactly is harmed when bullying occurs?
So basically everyone. You have the victims that are harmed, not only psychologically but physically, because there's psychological impacts such as, they already feel this loneliness, this social isolation, They feel like they have no control over what they're going through, and they fall in this pit of sadness and anxiety, and this leads to consequences in their eating habits, their sleeping habits, them not participating or enjoying in interests or hobbies that they once did, which adds to their protective factors that's also being taken away. So it's very much victims and bullies as well. I really think that bullying is something, bullies basically do what is done to them. And you also have the observers, which is, the bystander effect. They place the responsibility on other people around them, and they basically, okay, no, this person will take charge. And then most of the time, a lot of people don't take charge. And then it's a question of whether they are safe in the environment that is being questioned at the moment. Like observers, if that has to happen to me, will someone step in and help me? And the questioning of, am I in a safe environment? Because school is supposed to be a safe environment.
Yes.
But this is questioned when bullying happens.
So it's not just obviously the victim now, it's the people around the victim, the
Yes,
other learners in the class.
Yes, as well as the bully. Because the bully, a lot of the times, another characteristic of a bully is they have very limited or not a strong support system. Or their social interpersonal skills are also very limited. And if this occurs, it impacts their lives as well in long term. They can't have personal relationships with people. They aren't able to communicate with people. They struggle getting jobs. They struggle, participating in events that also require other people as well. So that's important. I think not many people, everyone just assumes that it's the victim that is the only one that's impacted. Yes. But it's the bully as well. If his bullying or her bullying is not addressed, he will have impacts as well in terms of social relationship skills and support systems and things like that.
Right. In terms of the social relationships and what you were saying was if the bully, it's not just the bully's life will be impacted. Can we then say that bullying is a learned behavior?
I do believe that bullying is a learned behavior purely because children in school, because that's what bullying is, it occurs within school-age children, and I don't think they have the capacity to think of this behavior themselves. So either it's demonstrated to them through their relationships at home, or how to resolve conflict at home, or through media, or through television programs that they watch. So it is taught to them, and it's very sad that this is their way of resorting to, resolving conflict, that they don't really know another way. Yes. And so I would say bullying is very much a learned behavior.
And then would you say that bullied kids would end up then bullying other kids?
Yes, I really believe that bullies are bullied themselves because they are doing what is done to them, because that's the only thing they know. If they're not taught how to resolve conflicts positively, how can we expect them to resolve conflicts positively? So,
okay, tell us then about the psychological impact of bullying on learners.
All right, so when someone is bullied, their feelings of being socially isolated and this being in a pit of sadness and loneliness basically creates a deeper pit, and this leads to conditions of depression and anxiety, which has a close connection with suicide. And this is why it's not to say that everyone that is bullied will commit suicide, but it's the consequences of bullying that lead to depression and anxiety that raise suicidal risks as well, because it gives power to suicidal ideation and suicidal attempt as well.
So it does actually lead to that kind of thought.
There is a link. It's not to say that all individuals that are bullied will commit
Okay.
suicide. It depends on their protective factors, on their resilient factors. Do they have a strong support system? Are they receiving the help that they need for this bullying? You know, are they having parents that listen to them? Do they have parents that sit down with them and listen to what is the meaning behind them being bullied? You know, and all these things contribute to whether they will have a greater risk of committing suicide.
Okay, so then you've touched on the suicide and bullying link. Is there a link between other bad behaviors, or rather negative behaviors, besides suicide?
Substance abuse, because they want to take away their pain, and substance abuse is one of the ways in which individuals often take away their feelings in terms of, I don't want to feel this, so if I drink this or eat this, I will feel better because I'm not feeling at all.
Yes.
So it leads to things like substance abuse, which is again connected to conditions such as depression, anxiety, and all of these things.
All right. Tell us about, is it possible for learners, young learners, to get depression?
Yes.
As a result of bullying?
Yes.
What are some of the signs we should be looking out for?
Usually when
parents, as
there's changing in their eating habits, so either they're eating too much or too little, or sleeping habits in terms of, are they sleeping too little, sleeping too much, is there difficulty maintaining sleep, and also another thing is, are they socially withdrawn from people, are they losing interest in activities that were once enjoyed by them. You know, this is important to look out for, and these are things parents can look out for as well. It's important, even though parents in today's age are very busy with work, it's where teachers have a responsibility to communicate with parents, like, your child has changed in class, what, you know, are they the same at home, are they different at home? And I think that's where the power relationship between parents and teachers come in to help the children.
So what else then can parents and teachers and maybe even other learners do to create a positive, empowering way for learners to not get bullied?
As I said previously, it's important that teachers not bully, but rather research the characteristics of a bully, so that they can distinguish in class between the type of learners they have and who might even be a potential victim to being bullied, and keep an eye on these children to prevent it from happening as well. And also, I think it's so important that children are taught what bullying is, so that they are able to report it. Because how can you report something
that you don't recognize?
Know? A lot of the time, people are like, no, it's just physical, like aggression. It can be anything. It can be a form of media. It can be, you know, simply just spreading rumors. That is a form of bullying. So if children are made aware of what bullying really is, then they are able to report it. And also, it's so important for schools and, you know, teachers to instill these policies where if you bully, these are the consequences. And it's important to treat them with the seriousness that bullying deserves as well. You know, you can't be like, oh, it's a small case of bullying, we're going to treat it a bit lighter, because the consequence is still the same.
Okay, thank you so much, Nadia, for giving us all that information. It's really very helpful.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. And there we have it. That's all we've got time for today. I hope you enjoyed the episode on bullying. I hope you found it useful and informative. And join us again next week, inshallah, for another episode of Schools Out. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
زمر باص المدرسة صوت على قلبي